Welcome to the Business of Us podcast. We invite top industry professionals to cover various topics. We promise to do our best to keep it both insightful and brief. In this episode, we have Jens-Fabian Goetzmann, Head of Product at RevenueCat. Jens, welcome back to the Business of Us podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a while. The last time you were here on the show more than 3 years ago, like January 2022. A lot
It's
of things have
been a
happened ever
minute.
since, as we both know. Boy, all right, to start off with this episode, I'm going to set the stage first. So, when it comes to growing app revenue, there's no shortage of advice. But separating the shiny growth hacks from the strategies that actually move the needle is another story. In today's crowded subscription app market, you just can't set a price, launch, and hope for the best. You need to understand your users, their behaviors, and the subtle levers that can help you turn one-time downloads into long-term customers. In this episode, I'm joined by Jens to draw on his experience both inside a subscription app team and now supporting others. Jens shares practical, tested ways to increase revenue, from smarter pricing strategies to better handling of cancellations and reactivations. If you're building, marketing, or monetizing an app, this conversation is packed with insights you can start applying right away. Whether your goal is to capture more value from your most loyal app users, adapt pricing for different markets, or simply stop leaving revenue on the table. Jens, before we dive into this topic, can you talk a little bit about you and your background in tech?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll keep it brief, but I will go way back. So studied computer science way back in the day. And while I was doing that, I kind of built a couple of failed startups on the side and realized that I didn't know anything about business. So I went into consulting after school and spent a few years in consulting and kind of went around the world, ended up in San Francisco, where I left consulting and then went into product management at Microsoft, spent a few years there. Then moved back to Berlin, where I'm originally from, and joined a health and fitness app here, 8Fit, where I was responsible first for monetization and then later for the whole product team. And that's how I basically found my way into the world of subscription apps. And yeah, witnessed a lot of the challenges there that apps have with monetization, and then subsequently decided to join RevenueCat, which is now more than 4 years ago. And at RevenueCat, I lead the product and design team.
Wow, you're a citizen of the world. You lived on both sides of the pond, got great experience of working in the app subscription teams, and now bringing that experience to helping others. Terrific.
Mm-hmm.
Now, tell me about RevenueCat.
Cool. Yeah. So for those of you who are not familiar with RevenueCat, RevenueCat provides infrastructure and tools for monetizing apps through in-app purchases. We are trusted by more than 50,000 apps and now tracking more than $10 billion in annual revenue. And I talk about RevenueCat, kind of why you would use RevenueCat in four pillars. The first one is easier implementation and maintenance. So getting started with just building the basics of in-app purchases and in-app subscriptions. The second one is cross-platform subscriptions, so making it really easy to, for example, subscribe on the web and then access that subscription on iOS or Android. Then data, consistent and normalized and actionable data, that is data that you can act on and that you can actually make decisions on. And lastly, growth tools like experimentation, paywalls, targeting and segmentation. So that's kind of how RevenueCat helps these developers of 50,000 apps, help make more money.
Wow, 50,000. That's a nice number. So many apps in this world are on a subscription model, and there's got to be a company that is helping them to build their business sustainably. But I was going to ask you, do you guys have a cat on staff?
A cat. Well, there's we do obviously have team members with cats, and we now have what we introduced a few months ago, our RevenueCat Friends, which is a cast of cartoon-like cat characters. Well, I think 5 cats and 1 squirrel that is pretending to be a cat. So those are the cats that we have.
Terrific. Anyway, zooming into our today's topic. In your experience, what are the most effective ways for subscription app developers to identify untapped revenue opportunities without pushing away their existing user base?
Cool. I'll kind of share a few things here, a few kind of tips in different directions. So the first one is being more active or more aggressive in pricing and upselling, especially early on. Meaning, when people start using your app, try to really, that's when they have the highest motivation usually to make a change, to make a purchase, because they just went over a big hurdle to even start using your app. And there I would say, because you asked about not alienating your existing user base, start with focusing on new customers, right? Like, often you can experiment more easily and more quickly on the customers that you newly acquire rather than the ones that you already have. And once you've learned something, you can try to roll it out also to existing customers. But I would be more careful there. Like, somebody who comes in and does not have a preconceived notion yet, like, that's usually an easier way to experiment. So that was the first one. The second one then is around pricing, differentiating pricing tiers, and really thinking about, can I somehow introduce multiple price points, right? Like, the very typical way that subscription apps almost always do that is having an annual and a monthly tier. But what I'm talking about is kind of going beyond that, right? Thinking about other different tiers of service that I can offer, thinking about, are there ways in which I can maybe offer a lower tier that's not a subscription, but rather like, individual consumables? Can I maybe add something more to people that are getting even more value? Or basically, moving away from the single price point, to, delivering differentiated value to people with different willingness to pay. Another one is exploring different business models. So including things like bundles, B2B. So, are there ways in which you can sell, multiple seats to businesses? And, consumables, I already mentioned this, which is basically kind of just moving away from the pure subscription model. And then lastly, localizing monetization. That's a big topic, which is kind of multifaceted. Like, really thinking about, like, often we kind of set the prices as saying, okay, like, I'm anchoring this on the US dollar price, which is often the most important market for many subscription apps, right? So you're kind of choosing the US dollar price, and then, everything else kind of just follows that pricing. And that's not necessarily the best idea.
That's a nice set, Jens. For me, Netflix has been one of the brightest examples of how you can juggle your revenue model when you're providing a subscription to your customers. So for a million years, I thought that Netflix will not ever introduce advertising as one of the tiers for their service, because I remember, like, whenever you have to come up with an example, what would be a best example of a subscription app that is solely based its revenue generation on subscription? Netflix was on the top of the list. Then all of a sudden they realized that advertising may work, and precisely because on some of the markets there is a potential to monetize these people, because charging them their regular price for subscription didn't actually work as they hoped it will be working. So they decided, let's broaden the set of revenue models and go with advertising as well. And sure enough, it's been working for Netflix. They're providing both, like taking best from the both worlds, subscription and advertising.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, like, Netflix is a great example, right? Where, like, literally the content that you get on the different tiers is by and large the same, right? But, they I don't know how many tiers they have now, right? Because they're like, okay, well, you can have with ads or without ads. You can have, SD or HD. You can have streaming on one device or multiple at the same time, right? Like, there are all of these small differentiations that they've introduced, even though it's all the same content, right? And I mean, I think, like, one caveat that I want to make here obviously is, like, a big risk is premature optimization, right? So, like, if you're a small app that's just starting out and you're making your first, like, tens of thousands of revenue, like, it's not worth investing in this generally, right? Like you're optimizing for the wrong thing. But if you're making hundreds of thousands or millions of revenue every month, then like certainly like you need to kind of make sure that you're optimizing for like all of these levers, right?
Yeah, that's a great caveat because we're giving you Netflix as an inspiration, but remember the size of the company and the size of your business. So you need to be more cautious. But on the other hand, it gives you a great example of somebody who is that big and still being innovative and still not
Hmm.
just sitting on their laurels and uh, you know considering that the deal is done, they're happy, the revenue is being generated nicely. We're just gonna stick with their regular subscription model and we're good.
Yeah, and they have retention rates too that like any old subscription app could dream of, right? So yeah, like totally like an inspiration for us all.
All right, now switching to region-specific strategies. Um, how should app teams approach balancing global pricing strategies with local marketing purchasing power, especially when user behavior differs greatly across regions?
Yeah. So I mean, I think like the number one thing here is always to say experiment, right? Like you really there's only so many things here that you can kind of conjure up on a piece of paper and say, okay, like this looks like the perfect pricing strategy. So you should always experiment. But here are a few considerations. I think the first and important consideration is really to think about what is your positioning as a product, right? Like, are you a premium product or a mass market product? Because the more premium of a product you are, the more you are like, kind of catering to the top earners, the top income bracket, right? The more you will have one pricing globally. Like, that the same is true for like all kinds of luxury brands. Like, it doesn't really matter whether you, buy a Rolex in Europe or somewhere in like South America or whatever. It's going to cost you the same. Right. Whereas, like, again, the Netflixes of the world, like you can see that they are clearly a mass market product and they have much broader price differentiation. Um, and then so I think using that is kind of the lens to which with which to look at pricing, right? And then often a good starting point can be some of the price indexes that you find, right? Like more general purchasing power parity indexes, or something like Netflix or Spotify, just looking at what is their pricing, because there you can look up their pricing around the world and maybe use that as an anchor. But I would definitely say go beyond that and also think about what are the local preferences, and do try some of those things, right? So, for example, trial versus no trial. There's people look at trials very differently in different countries. Similarly, the type of product that you're offering, subscription versus non-subscription. I think this is something where there's still a lot that we can learn as a subscription app industry. And Google shared some really interesting numbers there, where if you look at kind of on the Google Play Store, the purchase behavior that people have in North America, 86% of people who buy on the Play Store buy subscriptions. So that's a very common very common business model. Like, as we all know, who are kind of operating subscription apps, the US market, very big market for subscriptions. But then if you look at East Asia, at Japan and Korea, you see something more like a 50-50 split, where 50% of people who buy subscriptions and 50% buy one-time purchases, right? So it is then about, okay, can we think about this from a more region specific perspective? Can we maybe unbundle? Can we maybe do other things that kind of fit more with these local preferences for buying? Some other ways to maybe play with there are things like non-recurring subscriptions, so season passes, for example. And then also, especially on the Google side, there's a few more things that they've introduced more recently, like installments and prepaid plans, that are also worth checking out. Again, mostly I would say as an optimization mechanism, probably not something that you try out like as you're first launching your app, but certainly when it comes the time to say, okay, like how can we grow in other markets that maybe aren't the markets where like everybody's finding success, like the US? Can we just play around with this a little bit more?
Gotcha, Jens. So, like with every business decision, you have to factor in the culture of a country you're going on the market to introduce your product, and it's a gold rule. It applies to every business vertical, and the in-app business, it's as relevant as any other vertical. Now, with increasing number of tools and APIs enabling new monetization models, how can product teams decide which innovations are worth adopting versus which might distract from their core offering?
That's obviously always a great question and one that is very hard to answer. But I'll give my thoughts regardless. I think, number one thing is that the core offering should always come first, right? Like in the end, it is my very strong belief that value needs to create it first before it is extracted, right? Like you can get away for a short time by basically, selling people on hopes and dreams, right? But that's going to come crashing down pretty quickly. So 100%, you know, focus on building a product that is engaging and retaining first, and then once you have that, then you can kind of expand your monetization models and stuff like that. So um, I would say again, the first step should be validating that you can monetize and retain customers. And I would there say just use the easiest path. So that will often be subscriptions, using in-app purchases, basically like stock standard. And then once you've proven that that works, right? Once you've proven that that is something that works, that you can scale, that you can acquire users profitably, that you can, basically build a growing business from that, then you can optimize. I think again, premature optimization is often what is like the worst distraction. And if you have a business model that won't work with like the stock standard, it is very unlikely that you'll optimize your way to finding like to making that work by tweaking your monetization model. So having said that, then um, when you're trying things, right? Like when you're trying to find your business model, optimize your business model, the earlier you are, the bigger your swings have to be, right? So like if you have limited volume, you need to make radical changes. So like double the price, triple the price, rather than A/B testing incremental changes, that's not going to lead you anywhere, right? Like you just try like wildly different things. Again, the upside of being small is also that like your downside is also very capped, right? Like if you don't have that many users, like the worst thing that happens, you lose all of your few existing users. But like it's different than, again, like somebody like Netflix cannot like double their price for an experiment, right? Like that would lead to a huge backlash. Like when you're a small app, nobody cares. So then I would say a B test only when you have the sufficient sample size. So only when you really like will be able to see that. And then lastly, I will say make changes with the clear hypothesis and a targeted use case. So, whenever you try something new with respect to your monetization model, have a clear hypothesis and try to like isolate that hypothesis as much as possible. So I think one specific example there that I will give is like obviously web to app or web monetization has been one of the hot topics for the past few years, and kind of coming back up again and again, most recently with Apple versus Epic. What I will say here is that I think like ideally you test that even when you have a concrete hypothesis for how is this going to be better, right? So not just like, oh yeah, like we can avoid paying Apple the 30%. That's maybe a nice benefit, but like try and have a targeted use case where you say, well, for this particular type of use case, for this particular type of customer, for this particular type of channel, we believe that this is going to work better because XYZ. And then you can test that, right? And then you can learn from it, because then you can also learn from it if it doesn't work, rather than just kind of throwing something at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Great. Now let's talk about churn reducing and reactivations. So, what are some of the most overlooked techniques that can be leveraged to reduce churn and increase reactivations?
Cool. Let me kind of talk about these two things kind of somewhat separately, right? So like I'll first talk about churn, and here one of the things that I think subscription apps can learn a lot from is what games do, right? And I mean, often games are kind of somewhat ahead in monetizing and engagement, right? Like a lot of the kind of viral loops and techniques that for engagement that kind of apps use have been perfected in games for years before then. So in particular, one thing that I think games have gotten really great at over the last few years is live ops, right? Live ops as a whole discipline, which basically is the mechanism by which you keep a game with, like, one core mechanism fresh and keep people engaged and coming back. So what can we learn from that, as kind of subscription apps? It is the idea of, again, like, continuously updating content and continuously keeping your app fresh by running sort of events, right? That are frequent, meaning, like every time you come back to the app, not necessarily every time you come back to the app, but like whenever you come back to the app after you've gone for a little while, there's something new, right? Like, just keep the app fresh and engaging. Um, Also, time limited, so driving urgency, right? If something is only there for a limited time, it drives the urgency to subscribe, to purchase, to engage now, right? It's like, you can't just kind of keep pushing it off because it's going to be gone. Introducing some sort of competitive and social aspect. I mean, this is a little bit of a double-edged sword, because I think that, like, social aspects are hard to bolt on, so it kind of needs to be already a part of your app's value proposition. Otherwise it won't work. Like, it's hard to bolt that on. Community driven, meaning listen to customers, right? Like, if customers tell you they would love content XYZ, like, can you give that to them, and can you make the fact that this is something that the community requested part of that value proposition, right? I think, like, that's a self-reinforcing loop. And lastly, tying that in with the real world, so seasonal events, collaborations. I think, like, that again, like, gives you an anchor for these events. So that's on the churn reduction side. Now, on the cancellation side, there's a few or cancellation reactivation side, there's a few things that I will say. So I think, firstly, harnessing cancellations to understand why customers are canceling. And I think this is something that is definitely underutilized still. Like, yes, people use cancellation surveys, but very often what you will find is that, what you will hear from most customers that are canceling is, well, it was too expensive. But too expensive is not really a reason, right? Too expensive is always means I did not get the value that was, that was worth what I paid, or like, I did not I don't think I got the value of what I paid for, because like the price was there when they subscribed, right? It's not like they subscribed and only then did you reveal the price. So they knew what they were paying for, right? It's just that they didn't get the value. So then really digging deeper into why did they not get the value? What was the expectation, and how did the app fail to meet that expectation? And then, okay, like, that's about learning from it. So then, how do you address cancellations? Of course, the best thing is always, like, if somebody doesn't cancel, but even after they cancel, re-engaging them with all of the techniques that I just talked about, is still, the best mechanism to bring people back in. Also, offering people alternatives to cancellation, like downgrades, pausing their subscription, giving them a discount. And lastly, then, once they have churned, we're trying to win them back. So a few things there that can work is, firstly, personalized messaging. So really trying to figure out, what is it that this person wanted from this app, like, rather than just something that is generic, really talking to their use case, to their goals. Using fresh content and functionality to win them back. This can, like, these two work well together. If you understand, hey, I don't know, let's say I have a fitness app and this person was interested in yoga, right? And now I have, like, fresh new yoga classes. That might be the hook to bring them back in. And lastly, seasonal messaging. I think this is something that is, very well known, but it works. It works, right? Your Black Friday, your Valentine's Day, your back to school campaign, your New Year's campaign, right? They work, right? Like, people use them because they work, and they work very well at winning back churn subscribers as well.
Love your point about it's when people say it's too pricey. It's just it's always subjective. Too pricey for what? It doesn't meet your expectation. This is what
100%.
exactly trying to say. And just like with every other product, with app subscription is the same. If it doesn't meet their expectations, it's too pricey. It's not about number. It's about this correlation. Does it fit or doesn't fit into my expectations? That's very smart
100%.
point. You mentioned partnerships. So from a product perspective, how do you see the role of partnerships evolving in helping app differentiate themselves and create a long-term customer value?
Yeah, 100%. So I think partnerships are definitely an underutilized channel today. And there's a few ways in which I think they can help. So, firstly, one thing that is worth noting here is that partnerships can often be a win-win. So that means they can often be obtained at no real cost to the app business, because often both the partner and the app will accrue some sort of benefit there. So then from the app's perspective, I think they can help in a few different ways. The first one is just being able to provide an additional subscription benefit. So one example here is that I often refer to as Onyx. That's a hunting app, and they have plenty of partnerships with like equipment suppliers for like hunting gear, right? So you can see that where you can get a discount on buying something, and you can see how as a subscriber, this is now an additional benefit that I see. So this increases the perceived value and therefore can increase conversion, from the perspective of the app. Conversely, it can also act as an acquisition channel for the app if you basically use these offline retailers or whatever as basically as channels, right? Where again, like you walk into your local hunting equipment store and they might have something about this hunting app. Hey, like, this is our recommended partner if you're looking for a hunting app. And lastly, and I think this is something that I think is somewhat under underappreciated, is that it can help with mental accounting. So what does that mean? So basically, as human beings, we're very biased in how we perceive the world around us, right? And one of the funny things that we do is we don't ascribe the same value to money depending on the context that it is in, right? And often people have a limited willingness to spend for digital goods, for like subscriptions on their phone. But again, let's go back to the example of the hunting app. Hunting is an expensive hobby, right? So you're like people probably spend like hundreds and thousands of dollars on that hobby. And if you as a hunting app can basically kind of put yourself in that category, right? Like, this is a hunting expense. It's not a digital goods expense. Like, people will be much more willing to spend from that mental account, right? And again, doing that by saying, well, this is not only a digital purchase, but what you're buying here is also physical aspects, like cheaper gear, that kind of associates yourself with those physical purchases that people are willing to spend much more on than they would be on a random app. So I think that's kind of a trick. It does not require partnerships, this kind of mental accounting trick or whatever, or tapping into that bias, but I think it's a very good way to do so.
Another great point, Jens. I think especially for the older generation for whom any digital product, they cannot grasp it as the actual product. It should be tangible. It's I think for many of us, I'm not sure about Gen Z, but from millennial like me, it may not be equal. When I'm paying for something tangible, I can put in my pocket, or an app that on this device that I'm putting in my pocket. There's always a difference in my
Mm-hmm.
perception and my willingness to pay. Is it enough, excuse me, is it too much or not too much to spend $20 a month for something that actually not occupying any physical space? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a psychological trick that that works for so many of us. Psychological bias, as you're saying. All right, now to land our plane today, what is the best way people can get in touch with you and get more information about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me and of course RevenueCat on Twitter/X. That's where I am the most active. Also LinkedIn, of course, but I rarely post there. I rarely check that out. And also, I do have a personal website that I occasionally write articles on, but far too rarely. So you can find that by just googling my name.
Terrific, Jens. Thank you so much for coming on our show and sharing your experience. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye. And that was Jens-Fabian Goetzmann, head of product at RevenueCat. To listen to more episodes, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube podcasts. Just search for Business of Apps and you will find us easily. Remember, we release episodes on Mondays, so subscribe and you will be able to get new episodes on your smartphone, tablet, or computer as soon as we release them. And please don't forget to leave us a review or comment on iTunes. It is highly appreciated. And All episodes will also be available on businessofapps.com. Thank you for listening. See you next week.